All right, good evening, everyone. Today is Thursday, December 10th. Welcome to the school committee meeting. At this point, I'd like to call this meeting to order and start with attendance. Charlie Donahue. I see you. There you are. Hi, Charlie.
Hello.
Maya Plotkin.
Here.
Hello, Maya. Amanda Phillips.
Here.
Hi, Amanda.
Hi.
Tony Mullen.
Here.
Hi, Tony.
Hey, Cal.
Welcome, everyone. Before we get started, as we always do, we recognize this is a live broadcast that on stream is available through the Westwood Media Center. This is live at the Westwood website, westwood.k12.ma.us/live. This is to provide real-time public access to the activities of this school committee in accordance with the March 12th, 2020 Executive Order of Governor Baker. All right. So welcome, everybody, and we'll kick off. Emily, if you could start with the superintendent's report.
Great, thank you. Hello, everyone. So I'm starting the superintendent's report with some COVID-19 updates and look at our current data. So we had a busy week last week with 11 positive COVID cases in the district. I would observe kind of two things that we're noticing. Many of the individuals in that 11 were already in quarantine, having been previously identified as a close contact. And so that is good that protocol does seem to be working. So when we go to do the contact tracing, they haven't been in the building for a couple of days typically. We have also seen an increase in the amount of time that it's taking people to get test results. So when students and staff are out because they're symptomatic, it's just taking time to wait for those results. We are updating our COVID dashboard that is on the district website 3 times a week now. So we update it on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday at the end of the day. And on Friday, we send a link to families. I want to point out that you may notice a discrepancy in the numbers that are reported publicly by DESE. So they're reporting positive cases in districts. DESE only reports the case if the individual has been in the building in the prior 7 days. And, with our Monday, Thursday cohort model and weekends, we often get positive cases where the person has not been in the building in the 7 days prior. So we do still report those to DESE, but DESE does not include those cases in their publicly reported data. So that's why our dashboard and their spreadsheet looks quite different. So I'm going to turn it over to Abby so that she can give you the monthly update. Let me share my screen.
Thanks, Emily. So what we're doing here is we're going to carry forward.
Abby, you're on mute, I think.
No, I can hear.
We're going to carry forward the numbers so you can see that.
I still can't hear Abby. Can anyone hear her?
Yeah, I can hear her.
We can hear her.
Can't hear anyone. It's me. I can't hear anyone. Okay, I'm all set now. Thank you.
So we're going to carry forward the numbers from the previous month so you can kind of watch it in real time as it moves. So this would be our December update, and you're going to be able to see the previous November and the previous October information in parentheses as we go. So Emily, there we go. So since 9/14, this is for the students. We've had 486 students be supported by the COVID-19 team, and that means that they've been absent from some in-person instruction. That is approximately 16% of our student population. We've also had about 454 students of that 486 be returned to school for in-person learning through the work of the COVID team. They've cleared them to return. Currently, we have 32 students who continue to learn remotely due to being quarantined due to multiple reasons. Sometimes it's travel, sometimes it's close contact, sometimes it's illness. And then in addition, we have 26 students who have been identified as positive. And you can kind of see that number as it's been moving over time. We thought we'd do this for you guys just so you could see the number broken out across grade levels. This would be the cumulative number of total positive student cases mapped against the grade levels, including our preschool, which has no cases, and our kind of postgraduate program, which we call SP for the purposes of reporting, which also has no cases. So you can see somewhat of a trend line across the grade levels.
Do you or Karen, does somebody track if it's symptomatic or not?
We probably could go back and do that for you. I think that's not something that's represented in this
Okay.
graph.
I'm just curious if there was a ballpark number. Yeah.
So in terms of the staff, since 8/31, which remember they were in 2 weeks earlier, so there's a longer time span here for staff. We have 166 staff who have been supported by the team who have been absent from in-person work for some period of time. Of our 622 staff total, that's about 26% of the staff pool being impacted in some way. Of those 166, 152 of those people have been cleared to return to in-person work, which is really great. And again, just a ton of work on the part of the COVID team to track that and do all that. So that gives us that we currently have 14 folks who continue to work remotely today due to being quarantined due to travel, close contact, or illness. And again, that's a variety of reasons over a variety of timeframes. And in cumulative, we have 17 folks who've been identified as positive on the staff side. And this is really maybe the most important number, is that the team has also consulted with over 300 community members. So that's a mix of parents, staff, folks who are calling just with a technical question, people who are calling with a travel planning question since 8/31. And that's just a real important service to the community, just to help people make sense of the variety of information that they experience. So we are super appreciative of the work of Karen Pareda, Matt Gillis, and Paul Lilla for doing all of that. Any questions? Anything else you'd like to know?
Okay, great. Well then, Abby, I'm going to have you keep going because Abby is also going to provide an update on some things related to special education.
Sure. So we thought it might be useful to just give you a quick synopsis of some of the information we shared at our most recent CPAC meeting to parents. And we also emailed it out to all parents of students who have IEPs or 504 plans in the district. So just a quick update. A directive from the Department of Ed came out that every student with an IEP needed to have what's called a COVID plan, a learning plan that describes the differences in the structure of their special education program based on our hybrid schedule. And so we've had meetings, and we were directed by DESE to prioritize students who we prioritized as high needs. And so we are on track to meet the goal of having meetings for all of our high needs students by 12/23, which is coming really fast. So that's in addition to students' annual IEP meetings or other reconvenes. All our high needs students will have had an opportunity for a meeting before we break for Christmas. And that was an important goal for us. And we're on track for that one. Some of those meetings have happened at monthly clinics as well as by phone if the parent consented. So they weren't all Zoom meetings. And on the agenda for that is what's called COVID compensatory services. And if we didn't prioritize a student as high needs, they'll still have a chance to have that conversation during the course of the year when their annual meeting comes up later in the calendar. Another big project we've been working on is that, if you guys recall, we had a bunch of students who did not have special education evaluations during the period of our spring closure from March to June. And so we identified all those kids. There were 54 of them. And we're really proud that we've gotten through 53 of those evals, and we have one student who's partially complete and will be done probably by the end of next week. And that's just a really big deal that kind of puts that piece of the puzzle together for us and lets us move forward. And we're super appreciative to parents who are flexible and collaborative and patient and kind, as well as our staff who worked double, triple time to get them all done.
Thanks, Abby. Any questions about that?
I just have a question on, first of all, thank you very much for all you're doing. This is tremendous, the effort to catch up and do all that. But have there been anything different with regard to the Metco kids in getting them back to school, getting them back, testing, all that? It's more complicated, I'm sure, but how is that going? And are there any problems with that, or are there things going to be done any differently?
So I would just say that broadly, we work really hard with all the parents and all the students, and we make sure that kids are connected, and that our Boston resident students have had a lot of outreach, and their families have been great about responding and connecting. So, each kid is an individual, and we make a plan student by student, but the reality is those guys are hanging in there and doing okay, but it's hard, and I wouldn't want to minimize the challenges for anybody in this environment.
Thank you.
Somewhat thematically related to what Abby was just mentioning, in the spring, we also were not able to complete our kindergarten screenings due to the closure. And so that has been another project for this fall. And we have now completed, I think it's 200 case screenings as well. So that was a big piece of work, and I thank all the folks who were involved in that, but we're back on track there. Couple other COVID-related items. So we've been taking a close look at first quarter grades at the high school, just because, we want to make sure that we're looking at sort of student achievement and how kids are doing in this model. So I'm happy to report that when we took a look at those first quarter grades, we determined that the percentage of students who had failed classes was effectively the same as this time last year. And, we were concerned that we might see a jump in that number. Term one, it was 0.9%, so a little under 1%. And last year it was 0.86%, so remarkably similar. I would just mention that Westwood's hybrid model really prioritizes remote synchronous learning, and that was a choice that we made, that our teaching and learning working group really thought about over the summer, and I think that we're seeing a positive impact having made that decision. Ms. Davenport attends a job alike with other high school principals in tech communities, and this has been a topic of discussion, sort of how things are going in terms of kids' achievement. And generally, I think it's fair to say that the schools that have more synchronous learning saw more stability in terms of what happened with their grades this year as opposed to last year. And in fact, some of the districts that are providing asynchronous learning on remote days saw a substantial increase in their failure rates. So it's just a nice piece of data for us. And of course, the high school will really continue to look at that quite closely. Another thing that we're looking at is we're tracking requests that we're getting from people to move from hybrid to fully remote. As you recall, we had asked people in the summer to really commit to their model for the first semester, and we're going to offer a transition at the end of semester one. However, the reality is that we're seeing families who, given what's happening with the COVID metrics, are asking to go remote before that halfway point. And we consider each one and we see if we're able to accommodate the request. If people are nervous about coming into the building, it's hard to kind of push that issue. So we began the school year with 8% of our students opting for fully remote across the district, and we're now at 10% as of today. We've seen the biggest uptick at the secondary level. So the high school began the year with 48 fully remote students, and we're currently at 86 fully remote students. We're at 8% at the high school, 11% at the middle school, and 10% at elementary. We are also starting to receive requests to go temporarily remote. So we're starting to have families ask us, to say we're feeling a little bit concerned about metrics right now. could we just go remote until January, or, and then make another decision then? We are finding those requests a little more challenging to manage. Kind of the, in and out selecting your own program is tough to support operationally. So we're trying to support people to the extent that we can, but we've got to think more carefully about that situation. We are also thinking hard about how to address supporting students in K-3 when they have to be out to quarantine. And, how do we continue to have them feel connected to the classroom and support them academically? So the elementary principals have discussed that and have some ideas, and I think we'll have more to say about that soon. The Department of Education announced last week that they have decided to postpone the January MCAS for juniors. You may recall that the last meeting, Allison was saying we were going to have to do this, and out of nowhere they announced that is off for January, unfortunately, having done 3 weeks of prep work to schedule it. But we may be able to roll out those plans at some later time. We'll see. So they have not been clear about, is it going to come back later in the spring, or what the plan is at this point. And finally, on the COVID impacts, I just want to mention, I think the challenges of the pandemic have been hard for many people in many ways. And the district in the past has partnered with Westwood Youth and Family Services to give Westwood residents access to the Interface referral program, which is through William James College. And so we continue to partner around that, and have worked with Westwood Youth and Family Services so that next week all Westwood residents will receive in the mail a magnet, like a refrigerator magnet, with information about how to get in touch with Interface. And just to remind people, Interface, it's a matching service, so people of all ages can reach out, and there will be someone on the other end of the phone who can help locate an appropriate mental health provider for you. And I think what's really great about the service is that they stick with you through the whole process. So they keep with you until you have an appointment with somebody. And, it's really definitely going to happen. So it's a wonderful
with the common issues, common concerns, common things where groups of people could get feedback and talk with mental health providers. They don't need individual help, but they'd like to just hear feedback from people who are going through this, what they've learned, what they advise. Is any of that going on anywhere?
Mm-hmm. Well, I know that certainly is a model. I have to say, so I can't speak very specifically. For instance, Westwood Youth and Family Services sometimes offers groups. I don't know what they're doing currently. I think that our counselors probably do some of that kind of work. So I don't know, Abby, if you want to chime in on that.
So we have, limited group offerings. I think we have them in a variety of places, for students, particularly where we know we have common concerns and we have parental consent to have a group. I do think that the Interface kind of computer program actually lets you identify if you'd be more comfortable in a group model for seeing someone as a counselor. And so I think that that's a great option to consider, Charlie, especially if people want to use the Interface website and pick off, a group in a specific topic. So yeah, we're thrilled about the magnets. I have to say, one in every household in Westwood. That's a big deal.
The other thing I'm suggesting is more, not so much people talk to each other about their own problems, but they have a person who's kind of in the business, who is kind of doing a Zoom education. What are the most common issues? And they go through like 15 issues that have been identified as kind of a group education thing so people can tune in who have these concerns. They can maybe ahead of time say, these are my worries. And it's not so much people interacting with each other as well as somebody that has seen a lot of this and could offer group consultation and advice. That's another model.
Okay, Charlie, do you mean like those parent sessions that we used to offer prior to COVID, sort of where we had someone come in and talk about screen time or something like that? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, what I was asked was, is there a chance where people could call in with their worries and their questions that are related to mental health issues, and then have a person who deals with those issues, do a call where they say, here are the 15 most common questions I've had, and here's my advice and my thoughts, and people could just tune in. But it would be that sort of a feedback of concerns people have that don't want to seek out care themselves directly, but would love to have a call where 15 questions are answered every week for people who have these issues. And when we did our original survey, I think it was 30% of the families had issues and worries about mental health related issues. And so I think there's a lot of people out there, and I'm just thinking of there are other creative ways to provide advice to people without having to seek out care yourself. But, with group answers to common questions that people have.
Maybe we could reach out to Youth and Family Services. We did a couple of programs last spring that I think are along the lines of what you're talking about, Charlie. We did like a parenting in a pandemic or parenting in challenging times, and people sent in questions in advance, and there was sort of a panel that answered them. So why don't we reach out to those folks and maybe we can take a look at that.
Thank you.
Yep.
I have a question.
Yes.
Going back to the, remote versus hybrid selection, maybe we haven't gotten there yet, but do you know when families are going to be asked to make that decision for the second semester?
Yes. So we already did sort of a straw poll of our fully remote families last week, just to say, we're going to be asking you this in January. And so we'd like you to start thinking about it now. And can you give us any sense of things? So we have a little preliminary data, and we will need to ask them that by probably the first week of January to make a decision. Okay. And similarly, we'll communicate something out at that time to everyone, because we will need some significant lead time if there is a, significant change in the numbers. So.
Okay. So first week of January, people should expect something like that.
Yeah.
Okay. Thanks.
Okay. So also on the superintendent's report, are we done with that? Can I move?
Well, I had a question, but it actually, no, you continue because it's just COVID related. Are you moving on to the next item?
I feel like we have many things on the agenda that are COVID related. But is it,
no, quick question.
Why don't you ask your question, Carol? And then
I'm going to very, very quickly. It's really more to the beginning of your presentation, having to do with our team of 3, the superstars right now, dealing with so many different issues and folks calling in. And with the uptick and all, how are we doing? How are they doing in terms of? 3 people. We thought that was a strong number as a resource. How are we doing there?
That's a great question. And I would point out that when we formed the team, we, at the time in the summer, didn't think that we would be having athletics. And so, we have Mr. Gillis and Mr. Alila who work in athletics. And so now they're kind of doing double duty. So that is difficult and not what we imagined when we did the team. And I will say that we had envisioned that the nurse position that Karen Parita is fulfilling, when we asked her to do this, we presented it as part-time, like a 40%, 2 days a week kind of job. And it's turning out to be a 7-day-a-week kind of job. And so, the scope of it is a lot more significant than I think we anticipated. Having said that, I don't think we could do without it, right? So I think it just is what it is.
No, I'm just wondering, do we need...
do we
need more resources? We continue to have this uptick, and sports are starting on day, and it's an important resource right now, and I think people appreciate it, and it's worked well from the parent standpoint. We just want to make sure that we can accommodate.
Thanks for asking that question. I think that's really important, and what I will say is we are thinking about that. We will, I think we will definitely let you know if we think that we need to do more there.
Okay.
A couple of other towns in their surveys have asked for volunteers, parents who have a little time in their hand, they could help out. I know they have been doing contact tracing training programs on how to do it to help out. And I think it'd be worth exploring, are there families out there, parents willing to volunteer to help out on things like this? It's kind of like an all hands on deck issue that we're dealing with. And it seems to me that the three of them, the amount of things they're trying to do and to call up, I think it'd be worth exploring. Do we have volunteers in the community that would be willing to help out a little bit, get some training? A lot of the stuff they're doing is not necessarily medical, whatever, but they're trying to call up people and inform people, and they're doing a lot of again training of people who want to be volunteers on how to do the contract tracing in a sensitive, appropriate manner. So I think it'd be worth exploring. Is there some talent out there that we could draw on and use?
Yeah. I mean, it's an idea. I have to say, I do have some worries about confidentiality and sort of our responsibilities around student privacy. So that would be my concern about that. But yeah, I mean, we can think more about that. I should also mention that the town now has a public health nurse. And so that has also been really positive from our perspective, because we have been able to have the local public health department take on more of the contact tracing that I think we were kind of feeling like we were doing more of in the fall. So we have sort of a better divisional labor, I think, at this point. Okay, so I'm going to move on to cell tower decommissioning logistics. So as you know, the school committee decided not to renew AT&T's lease for the cell tower that's on the middle school. It was a 10-year lease, and we gave AT&T significant notice that we weren't going to renew it. I mean, I want to say 1.5 to 2 years notice. At last June's school committee meeting, I reported to you that AT&T had let us know that COVID had created some delays for them in terms of locating a new place for the tower, and they asked us for an extension from the provision of their lease that would have ended in November until the end of December to remove the tower, and we granted that request. They have now identified a location, and they're in the process of getting zoning approvals. I understand that theoretically would be happening next week, and they have asked for an extension through February. I have spoken with Chief Deckers to understand the public safety implications, because you may recall in June that was one of the concerns, that our fire and police rely on the AT&T network for their communications backbone. So I did speak to Chief Deckers, and he did communicate to me that from his perspective, it would be important not to have an interruption of service in town. So I think in order to support them, that we need to give AT&T one more 2-month extension, however frustrating it may be to be in this situation. Again, I had our attorney review the amendment and add language that specifies that there will be no further extension by the school committee past, or by the school department past February 28th. And she had a conversation with the attorney for AT&T to make sure that was clearly understood, that no further conversations would be entertained after this. So I'm bringing that to your attention, that unless there are objections, we would go ahead and execute that.
Can we just see
Go
the,
ahead. I guess, go ahead. I mean, I do find it frustrating. It was October 9th, 2018, which seems like a long time ago that we gave them. So they had plenty of time. I understand the public safety, so we of course have to do that. But I also expressed to the lobbyists that I personally didn't appreciate the tone in the lobbyist outreach to the school committee as well. So I just want to say that for the record as well.
I had our attorney communicate my annoyance with the tone as well. So I think that was communicated. Yes.
Thank you.
can we just see the revised amendment? I don't
Sure.
think we've seen that.
Okay, yes, I will. I didn't send, I must have sent it to Carol. I'll send it to all of you. You can
Okay,
take a look.
thanks.
Is it worth finding out other towns, maybe this has happened to, and do they pull this every time they do one of these things? And is this standard procedure for them to keep delaying and delaying for public safety reasons? Is it standard practice for these people? I'd be interested just to see, is this how they do it all the time? And their lawyers and everybody is piled on this, and this can go on and on, all using this safety thing. I'd be very interested in, are we unique, or is this a standard practice that they use? Have they figured out how to do this thing in the timetable before?
Yeah, I mean, I have no idea, to be honest. And I have to say, from my perspective, I need this issue to be closed at this point. We've been dealing with this for a long time. And so, I feel like we're doing a balancing act here where we want to support our partners on the town side. That seems important. And at the same time, I think we've been very clear that one way or the other, we are done with this in February. So even if their approvals didn't go through, we've told them not to come back to us, and I think we would just have to hold firm at that point. So I just thought that since I feel like this has, been the year where we just talk about COVID and public health all the time, that it would be important to spend a couple minutes talking about what's happening in schools. And I know we're also going to be talking about budget tonight, and I always remind people that the budget is sort of the technical representation of the values and the mission of the school. So I want to tell you a couple of things that are in the good news category, and then show you some pictures of students smiling and learning. So I think you saw that the Associated Press picked up the story about our high school students who were doing Romeo and Juliet through a virtual format. They're doing voiceovers for a graphic novel. And that was neat. It went international. And so I want you to know that the premiere is slated for January. So we will make sure that we promote that. Our Tri-M students, that's our Music Honor Society, Tri-M and Latin students are running remote rehearsals right now at the high school. They're planned to sing out high school students, sing them out of the building before the December break, outdoor and distanced and masked, of course. Over the Thanksgiving break, the senior class sponsored a sneak. And for the sneak, over 100 students participated by attempting to leave treats and "You've been gobbled" signs on participants' doorsteps undetected. I do not have the data on how many people succeeded at that, but participants. 230 student athletes just completed their fall season. Hannah Blumquist and Kevin McGower were selected as Boston Herald All-Scholastic athletes. Hannah was also named a Globe All-Scholastic athlete, and Kevin and Abby Crowley were named Boston Globe All-Stars.
I think that deserves a
Yay.
yay.
Congrats to them.
Yep.
Our high school academic decathlons, 15 members competed on November 21st, and they brought home 18 medals, winning in math, music, economics, science, art, and overall. And I think that it's possible that one of those competitors is related to somebody that's on the screen here tonight. So congratulations and well done to everybody. And then Mr. Schumann noted an interaction this morning with two students who walked into the high school excited to share the news that they got into their first choice colleges. And he just noted that you could see their smiles even behind the masks, and that it felt like this very normal moment where kids were coming in with their college acceptances. So that's great. The middle school, we have a student-led initiative, the TMS Unity Group, that is led by a sixth grade student, Isabel Chamo. And this sixth grade group has worked with their guidance counselor in collaboration with the Thurston PTO to partner with an organization called Bridge Over Troubled Waters. And our students are collecting and donating warm clothing and other necessities for homeless and other at-risk youth. So they will be continuing that collection over the next week if people would like to donate.
Where are they? Where do you donate?
So at the middle school, I don't know the specifics of that. We'll tweet that out so that
Okay, that's great.
people can
Yeah.
see that. And then I just want to show you some pictures. So, oops, how did I get back this far?
Emily, I have the answer to that question. The donations
Oh.
can be, yep, I got an email.
All right.
Donations can be dropped off at the Thurston Middle School main office between 9 a.m. and 12:30 p.m.
Okay. There you
It
go.
looks like from Friday, December 11th through Monday, December 21st.
Fantastic.
So there you go.
Thank you.
You're
Great.
welcome.
So the preschool is doing all kinds of things with gingerbread right now. And I like this photo because you would never guess that this is the old weight room at the high school, which has been converted into a new preschool classroom. Here are some third grade Sheehan students in music class outdoors, and they're doing a freeze dance. Here are some first graders at Sheehan in Ms. Carpenter's classroom. I think this is right before Thanksgiving, and if you look carefully, they're making butter. So they've got these jars and they're making homemade butter. It also appears to be some kind of pajamas day.
I was going to say, I
can
think it's pajama day.
Right. Some photos from the Martha Jones School from 1st and 2nd grade, and you get a glimpse of what it looks like in classrooms, and you see kids are hard at work and busy there. Also at Martha Jones, a shout out to the PTO who bought each staff member a warm poncho to wear outside during duties and mask breaks and lunch with the MJ logo. The PTO also got a grant from Dedham Savings Community Foundation, thanks to them, to purchase warm cushion seat for each student to use when they're sitting outside for breaks and for lunch and for classes. This is from the Downey School, where you can see Downey students celebrated our veterans by planting a flag garden in front of the school and creating a thank you sign. And they collected toiletries and gift cards for the New England Center and Home for Veterans. On the flag garden, each flag represents the name of a veteran who's connected to a Downey student or staff member. And here are also some Downey students who just got their word detective badges. And I saw a fantastic video that Sergeant Sicard did a couple of weeks ago where he was announcing or sort of commissioning them as word detectives and giving them their mission. And I see that they have achieved what they needed to do, use their problem solving skills to learn about high frequency words and what to do when they come across a word that's unfamiliar to them. So that is a little glimpse into what's happening here. And that is it for me.
Oh, it's so nice to have some good news more than ever, right? It's nice to not talk
Good to
about
remember.
COVID. Thank you for that. All right, we will move on to the chair update, liaison reports. Let's start with you, Maya, with the building project. Give us the update.
Yep, so we have a school building committee meeting tomorrow morning at 8 a.m. if anybody wants to tune in. It'll also be recorded by Western Media Center. And we are still...
You're not talking to us, right? Because we're going to be there.
You'll
mean
be
like
there.
Yeah.
I mean, if anybody, aside from the people who need to be there, want to tune in. We're still in schematic design, so there will be a project update. And, you know, sort of a design update. Not much has changed, but just to remind everybody, we're also going to be talking about cost estimates because we did get cost estimates back that we're working through. So we're going to be talking about those. So it should be an interesting meeting, and I highly recommend people watch it. If looking ahead, if you don't watch it, we do have a community forum on Tuesday that you can attend. And that will be Tuesday night at 7, again, via Zoom. We're hoping a lot of members of the community come. We'll be, again, presenting the current proposed design, which will be different from the one we presented at the last community forum. So I encourage people to see the updated design. And again, talking about cost of the project. So that, again, is Tuesday on at 7 p.m. on Zoom, and the information the school building website. And yeah, so that's sort of where we are with the building project. We're still targeting a May town meeting vote and a June ballot for the project. And with all these sort of steps in between with the MSBA submissions that we have to do. So, but we're still on that track. So that's where we are on the project. I don't know if anyone has any questions on that. Nope. Okay. I also wanted to give an update on the Sheehan Study, just to remind everybody, way back in February 2020, when we were meeting in person, the school committee voted to allocate around $30,000 to study what we were calling at the time the remaining school, which is the school that, you know, was sort of not part of the consolidation if there was a consolidation. In June, the school building committee voted to, move forward with the consolidation of Hanlon and Deerfield, which left Sheehan as the remaining school. And so at that time, the $30,000 was allocated specifically to study a design study for Sheehan. So Doran Whittier, began that study in July and has some initial designs. We are sort of looking through them, but what we're really looking at is we're probably going to be looking at a very similar level of design as, I don't know if you recall, when we did the 15 to 7 options of the school building project, that level of the 7 options that we reviewed, that will be the level of design. And we'll have most likely an just a straight renovation of Sheehan. We'll look at an option where we do an addition and a renovation, and we'll look at a new Sheehan, a new construction building. So again, very similar to the process that we had for the Hanlon project. Just a couple notes about Sheehan. We're looking at about an enrollment of 310 students. Again, this is the maximum peak enrollment, so that's what we're designing for. And all of that educational visioning work that we did back, for the Hanlon project, we are now finding extremely useful for Sheehan. We're basically just carrying that over into Sheehan. So there's going to be a very similar educational delivery model in that design. And I think you'll see that once we're ready to show those. I anticipate, given the budget is, this month, January and February, I'm anticipating that, and by the time the designs are really kind of flushed out, we'll probably present to the school committee in March. So sort of get that on your calendars. So at the March school committee meeting is when we'll show you these designs. And then a lot of people have asked about the schedule. One thing before I get into the schedule, I wanted to talk about is just to remind everybody that, this is all coming out of that master capital plan that we commissioned way back in 2015. So one thing we have done specifically for Sheehan is to request an update to that master capital plan, because what we really want to understand are the costs of keeping Sheehan online. And, what capital repairs can we do without having, anytime you sort of do capital repairs to a building, at a certain amount, you're going to trigger sort of compliance requirements. And so we need to understand what capital repairs are we limited to if we don't have the funds to, update the building and to bring it into code, because that's a really important component. That tells us how far we can take the Sheehan building. So we've asked for an update on that master capital plan. And that we're hoping to have again for the March meeting. And so for potential schedules, we've sort of been playing it out with Doran Whittier and what it looks like and what we could do. And I'm trying to find it in my notes here. So we really have sort of 2 timelines we can look at. The first one is, sort of go through this process, this high-level design. And then in spring of 2023, ask for money to move into the schematic phase of the design. Ask the town for money to go to the schematic phase of the design, which is what we're currently in for Hanlon. So that's when we dive, that's when we pick an option based on those 3 that we'll see in March. We dive down deep into them. And so spring of 2023, we would ask for the schematic money to do that. And then in the fall of 2023, we would ask for design and construction money all at the same time. So that would be the big chunk of money. That would allow us to occupy fall of 2026. If you recall, go ahead.
If there are any delays, particularly in this first project, right?
Right. So this is all, this is a very sort of fluid, right? We basically said to Doran Whittier, what is realistic, right? What's a realistic schedule? Putting aside COVID, putting aside, just what is realistic in terms of timing from one phase to the other. And this is one way to do it, where we ask just for schematic money, which is a fair amount, but not a huge amount, and then ask for the big chunk later. Another way of doing it is in spring of 2023, we ask for design money through bidding, which means it's a much larger amount, and it gets us through schematic design, and it gets us to the point where we have a design that we would put out to bid to contractors. And then a year and a half later, we would ask for construction money. So that's fall of 2024. We would ask for construction money. Again, occupancy fall of 2026. So these potential schedules would put Sheehan about a year and a half behind, opening after Hanlon does, right? Hanlon right now is projected of January 2024. This is fall 2026. So that's about a year and a half, right? 18 months.
It
Did I do that math right?
It would put Sheehan occupancy 18 months out from the Hanlon.
Right. Now, to be honest with you, we don't know what the appetite of the town is for this project. And, this is, I'm just caveating all of this with saying this was a question that was raised with our architect, saying, what is the schedule for that? We don't have the MSBA schedule to rely on here, right? What is the typical schedule when you've got, when a town is just doing it on its own? And this is sort of what they told us, given where we are and, the fact that we'll have this sort of high level design. The school committee can decide to move forward with it or not, or, that's a decision that we need to make. And I think the community is an important, sounding board for that. But we have been getting this question a lot. And so I did want to get information and address it and sort of present it to everybody. So that seems like if we were just to kind of move forward, that seems like a realistic time frame. Again, putting aside all of the external factors that we would also have to look at.
Right.
So,
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Anyone have any questions?
So that's where we are for Sheehan. So hopefully March, we can present just the results of the study we commissioned way back in February. And, at that point, we can decide to move forward. We can talk to the community. We can talk to, the select board and FinCom and everybody, all the stakeholders involved, and see how we want to go.
Okay.
Or not do anything. I mean.
Right. Okay.
So
Thanks,
anyway,
Maya.
that's it.
Okay. All right. How about the COVID-19 advisory group update?
Yeah, so there's so let me just and we have a slide and some materials that we can share to get input on, but I guess as an overarching couple things. One is, as Emily went through earlier, unfortunately the metrics have not been heading the right direction. So I think that's just been a lot of overall context with our conversations with our advisory board. Unfortunately, we're hitting records in Westwood, as Emily shared, the wrong type of records. So that's a bit of a context that we've been talking about with them. But really then wanted to talk about two things today. One, give an update on testing. And then two, there's been a lot of folks, and we talked about kind of metrics for kind of full in-person opening. We wanted to share with those what we're kind of proposing as well. So that's kind of, I guess, the two topics. So as far as testing, I know, Emily, there's a slide. I don't know if you.
Yes, give me one second. I can make that happen. Okay.
So what?
Uh-oh, sorry.
No worries.
Give me 1 second. Well, you know what? This is the long way, but I think it will ultimately be the short way. Here we go.
Yeah, so what I want to do is get an update on, there's been a lot going on since our last meeting in testing, and I think we made a lot of progress. I wanted to lay it out a little bit because it can get a little confusing. So let me just lay this out and then we can have a conversation. So, I think the first thing that I think we all know, but I think just for members of the community, as you know, we had a very generous donation from Ginkgo, and this last week there was a one-time testing for district staff. I think around 70% or so ballpark participated. That was conducted this week. I'll let Emily, when I go through this, and I'll let Emily comment on the first one in particular. The second piece is, so that's kind of what we did this week. That was a one-time It was saliva test, PCR. Then the second piece is, and this is for the community, the DESE, which is Department of Education, has an initiative where they have partnered with some districts to kind of roll out rapid testing. We're thinking about rolling this out. So rapid testing being kind of the 15 minute turnaround. This would only be, just to highlight, it's only, the rapid test isn't as good as PCR, but it's only really works at all effective for people who are symptomatic, right? So it's not would never be used for kind of broader assurance or surveillance testing. The idea, and we're still, I think, the COVID team and Emily and we, the advisors have to figure out how to do it. But I think the thought would be we would probably pilot this with one school or probably one school. And the idea would be it's an opportunity if you have a symptom, you have a cold, especially if it's getting the cold or flu season, a staff member, a student could get at least a quick test. If a quick test on COVID, it's provided by the state for free. It's a lot of there's a lot of logistics involved with it. Hence why we're going to thinking about starting with one school. So we can talk more about that. Then the third topic is unfortunately as these numbers have gone up. We saw, I think, some better testing metrics and turnaround times earlier in the fall, but as unfortunately as the caseload at the around the state has gone up, testing again, we're again having challenges with staff members or students in turnaround for testing. Sometimes multiple days, sometimes up to a week. That obviously is a challenge in a lot of dimensions. So we're working through, our task force has actually, there's one in particular provider that I think we will hopefully be able to soon be able to kind of share with people in the community, but we're trying to find someone, urgent care or partner who can help us to guarantee, some type of, testing 24 to 48 hours for those who are symptomatic, right? So this would be people who have some symptoms. This would not be kind of testing because, you've come back from traveling or something. So we're working on that, and that would be kind of a partner. Charlie can share. Wellesley's has a similar type of agreement with Newton Wellesley. So they found it very helpful to kind of refer people there. So that's the third thing. And then finally, what we talked a lot about and we approved kind of the RFP process for last time is the regular assurance / you can call it surveillance assurance testing for teachers, staff, and potentially students. So where we've landed on that, I think with the advisory group, is we are talking about doing PCR pool testing, likely weekly for teacher staff. Is kind of one place. We've leveraged, thankfully, and Charlie, thank you for all the work you've been doing with the COVID-19 Public School Collaborative. The good news is that we're able to actually move relatively fast because we're able to leverage some of the lessons that they've learned to actually talk to specific vendors. In particular, there's 3 vendors that some of the other neighboring school districts have worked with. So I think that will enable us to kind of move relatively quickly and have conversations. So we've started to have conversations with that. Finally, in some ways, because it's pool testing and because the costs have just come down as these have scaled, the costs have gone down for pooled testing. I think some neighboring districts are paying around $16. There's some anticipation it could get down to 10 to 15 by January. So the costs, relatively, at least there's some good news in the world. The costs have come down a bit, or quite a bit actually, which I think particularly, would make it easier to afford, particularly for staff, but also to potentially students. So we're in the process of having those conversations. Lincoln's been very helpful in helping drive that. So I think we're making good progress. So let me stop on the testing and see if you have questions or comments.
So on the, thanks, Tony. On the DESE rapid diagnostic testing, I know you said logistics will be an issue. That's really my question, is logistics. And are we sure that they're going to provide that resource in January? Do we have?
Yeah, we're sure. So we applied to be part of a pilot that they're doing. So we're one of like 130 districts that were accepted into this. And so we're going through a process with them right now. You know, we're going to their webinars, we're getting different certifications and physician's orders and training people. So we've got to do these steps. And once we complete that, we should be able to roll that out in January. I think, you know, we're still really thinking internally about what we want to accomplish with that, and therefore what we need to do. And we got some good feedback from our medical advisory group earlier in the week about that too. So a little further.
What's their feedback?
Well, just, I mean, I think they're really underscoring the idea that the rapid antigen test is, you know, not as reliable as a PCR test. And it's certainly only for people with symptoms, which we knew, you know, but there are questions like, if you take the rapid test and you're symptomatic and it comes out negative, does that mean we say, and now, you know, you're cleared to go to class? And so, you know, we need to go back and speak to the people who are leading it at DESE and just get a little more information, I think.
And would it be over a number of days, or would it be just?
It'll be every day. So
It would be every day of January.
Oh yeah. I mean, we could be in a
Okay.
situation potentially where every nurse is able to administer these rapid tests in every building. That,
Okay.
I mean, that's potentially an outcome.
Oh, great. Okay.
I have a question. Well, first, Tony, thank you for all of your hard work, and to everybody in the advisory group. I know that a lot of people are volunteering a ton of time, so it's so appreciated. Related to the assurance testing, so I was just wondering what percentage of the staff got tested this, oh, there we go.
I've got it. So glad you asked. And so across the district, all staff, it was 64% overall, but then I broke it down into different categories. So, you know, you can see here that, for instance, with teachers at the bottom, 72% of teachers and members of the WTA participated. You know, food services, 89% participated, right? You can see that we had sort of lower participation among custodians, about 29%. So, you know, I think that this one-time free test was good for us in many ways. It gave us a sense of, you know, what would it take to implement this? We now have a very clear sense of that. You know, we have some data here. I think we now have you know, an impetus to kind of go back and say, what are the barriers to participation, so that we can try to understand that. Because we really tried to do quite a bit of outreach to make sure that everybody who was employed by the district knew that they were eligible for this.
Okay, thank you. That's super helpful. And then along those same lines, we know, I'm sure we're going to talk about this, but looking at the parent survey responses that we got, it looked like the numbers weren't nearly that high in parents that would have their children participate in an assurance testing program. So I'm just wondering if the advisory group has like a benchmark in mind, like we need 80% of students and 80% of teachers to make this effective, or to make it worthwhile.
Well,
Go ahead.
Oh, go ahead, Tony.
Well, I guess there's two things. I think actually in the parent survey, there was only 8 or 9% that said definitely. It was a low percent, a single digit said they would definitely not. There was a huge, I don't know. So I was surprised actually. I thought it was better than I thought, because I think we've done zero education on this. Medway and other communities, and Charlie can talk to this, Wellesley, they did a lot of education around why they're doing this. So, and staff and teachers as well. I think that's as well. So I think Wellesley is in the 85 to 90%. I think somewhere that north of 80, I think a little below 90. At least that's where they were initially.
I mean, what the folks who you know, understand this say is that you really need it to be about 70% to kind of work in a surveillance model, and they'd prefer it to be 80%, is my understanding. I will say, I think that the data that we saw from the family survey, and I'll show some things later, that question's a little wonky because it was check all that apply. And so the percentages were strange. I think what you have to do is take the I would not consent and the I'm not sure, and then just subtract that sum from 100 to find out what the yeses is. It's higher than you think.
So I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I was thinking it was probably around like 60%, right? That weren't sure or wouldn't consent.
I've got it on a slide later, so I know I have it somewhere that I will show you tonight when we
Okay.
talk about the family questionnaire.
Oh, no, I'm sorry, 60% would, 40% wouldn't,
Right.
is what I meant to say.
Mhm.
Thank you, that's all I wanted.
Yep.
to know for now.
Great. Okay, so if we have nothing further, there's a metrics, I think that's in a Word doc or Google Docs document, metrics.
Yep. So, sorry, what did you say, Tony? Oh, the metrics. Yes. So
Yeah, I think Google.
that's also me. Just one second. I'm sorry. I've got to get that on the screen. Okay. There we go.
So I know we talked about some of this at other meetings, and we talked a lot about this with the advisory group. I think it was yesterday. So I guess overall context, I guess, as we talked with them, particularly the advisory group, is look, and I thought I kind of prefaced it, we're unfortunately on the curve like this, and, broadly before, you can look at any metric and define it, but before we can, be in person, I think there are guys, the curve needs to really start going the other way. It goes without saying. I think is one important piece. The other thing we did talk about, and you saw the headlines, it looks like we have these metrics, this can change in the context of, some good news, I think, from, the vaccines, Pfizer and Moderna, that will come, right? And we don't know what that's all going to look like. The other, you may have seen also, just as preface, that governor's plan on the vaccine rollout put teachers in phase 2, which according to the governor's plan would mean, so probably February, March, vaccinations being teachers being in that time frame, given the capacity. So I think that's also context that's not going to help us right now, but it's just think overall context in the metrics. So yeah, so the community, this data here is the red, yellow, green, gray, which I think we're all familiar with. Westwood still remains in yellow, though our positivity is almost 4%. So we're getting dangerously close to red. And then below, I think below is the actual metrics. Yeah. So here was the metrics that we kind of weighed in and got advice from the advisory group. I'm not gonna go, you can see there's some public health metrics around the green gray category. There's some metrics around positive cases. There's some metric around the positivity rate being less than 1% in Westwood, as well as the statewide rates. So that was one piece. As I mentioned, this caveat, as we understand the vaccine, understand what that does to the curve, we can look at these again. And then testing capacity as well. I think, the potential of doing surveillance testing and in concert with potential vaccinations, I think they saw as important to have that ability to be open fully. And then also the second piece that we talked a little bit about, the ability to actually have turnaround times on symptomatic staff as well in, a day, 1 to 2 days as well. And then there's some, pieces around fully remote, around, being in the red and so forth, around community spread and some of the other things around transmission. So, and these are like I said, I think these are a guide, this is, like I said, I think the overall message from them is, we really need to see that curve in the community in Westwood, as well as obviously the state really start to come down. And if it starts to come down, you'll obviously see these metrics start to improve.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this is something I know a lot of people in the community have asked for, what are the metrics? And I think so input's appreciated.
Well, thank you, Tony, for all you've done, and particularly thank your committee for putting their time in to look into these things. In response to one of the earlier questions, the towns that have attempted to educate the public about what's going on have all come in with 80+% support for asymptomatic testing of their kids. When they're told that 40% of the people that are COVID positive are asymptomatic, and they're asymptomatic teachers, who could infect other teachers and infect kids. They're asymptomatic kids who can infect other kids, and the asymptomatic kids who could get infected by somebody else and go home. So when they hear those statistics, The new test that they're doing now, our kids go home and put saliva into a tube. They're no longer putting things into their noses and all this. The kids come in with saliva, they're sent off. So I think, first of all, I congratulate you on lining up the people that have been doing these tests. Wellesley has learned the most. It cost them $85 to do one test about 2 months ago. It's now down into the $10 to $15 a test with the first-rate groups that's giving them high-quality data, providing it to people, and we've all benefited an awful lot from the Wellesley Collaborative. There was an article in the Globe a couple of days ago that was speaking about the haves and the have-nots, and what they're implying is the towns that are the haves can do all of this stuff. But interestingly enough, the Wellesley Collaborative, besides having some haves in it initially, like Brookline and Newton and Wellesley, have Revere and Chelsea, and a lot of towns that don't have a lot of haves. And so it's really a great example of communities helping each other out, experimenting. Tufts University has helped out Medford and a couple of the towns. So what we're looking at right now, and what your committee has advised, is to learn what they have taught us, which is to maybe begin doing saliva tests, doing pool testing, get a reasonable price. And I think that's a tremendous effort. And we're going to be at the cutting edge of what you can do. I think the symptomatic testing, as Emily has done, if the state is willing to help us out, we'll get started on doing that also. I just would like to maybe say, maybe it might not now, but I do have a grandkid who's 3 months old who just became COVID positive. Fortunately, it didn't go anywhere, but we also have a problem of a lot of asymptomatic people in daycare programs. They're doing the best they can. They don't feel sick, but they're infected. So as we begin to be innovative here, I think it might be valuable, as we're talking about paying for this, is to maybe see other people out there like daycare people who need to be helped, but also our firemen, our policemen, and other first responders, and to get the town to help us by getting them to give us saliva and tubes, as other towns are now beginning to do, and help to pay for the cost of some of this. So to be worth beginning to at least explore the cutting edge work you've done and what we're going to begin to doing, but to collect tubes with saliva in it isn't that much more complicated to begin to get municipal employees and help our firemen, our policemen, our ambulance drivers, all that stuff. So I think that would be something. It's also a source of some money to do it, but that's the only thing I'd suggest right now. I think you're right on target. You're going to be talking to some of the best people in the country right now that are doing it in an affordable manner. And if anything, if you really want to keep kids in school and get more kids back to school, this is the approach you got to use. Hopefully our teachers might have access to vaccines sometime like in April or May, because they're going to be at the high top of the list, but we're not getting a lot of the drugs in right now. And the kids are now just exploring whether they will give vaccines to kids 10 and above. They're just beginning to explore that, to study it. They haven't even done that yet. And for kids 10 years old and less, it's probably going to be next fall that they'll even be in a position. So right at the moment, we're doing the best we can. You've got the best advice out there your committee has presented. And I congratulate you for not only the hard work, but you're right at the cutting edge of doing the best things that can be done. And we also should be grateful for this model that was developed that's helped us and helped a lot of other towns, where the towns are really working together. And maybe we can educate the state, where it's state money that pays for these asymptomatic tests. That's where we've got to go. And I don't think they're too far away from beginning to appreciate that's where they should be spending their money. And there may be some federal money to help this. The other night on this collaborative call was this Auchincloss, the new replacement of Joe Kennedy, and the congressional staff person and the Senate staff persons for our senators, our federal senators, were involved in this COVID call with the collaborative. So there is going to be, I believe, federal money and state money helping out the towns in doing this testing on a regular basis come the first of the year. So there is hope. But again, congratulations. And thank you, Emily, for keeping this thing going. And I also want to thank Mr. Lynch, who has been helping us out quite a bit. I want to thank him particularly because I was educated in the Norwood school system, where his father was a superintendent of schools. So thank you, Mr. Lynch, for the help, continued help.
My pleasure.
I
Thank you,
have
Shirley.
a couple
ahead.
of comments on the public health metrics. So when we were talking about the DESI like color coded guidelines, I think it was like 2 meetings ago when Jared was here, we were talking about providing context in terms of the cases that we're seeing. So like, I'm thinking if, there's a cluster at the senior living community down on University Ave, it's not going to impact the schools. So is that something that we could incorporate? And then I also was surprised to see under the public health metrics that the expectation is that there'll be no positive cases in the schools. And is that like, so I'm confused if that's hard and fast, or Tony was mentioning that we're more looking for just like a downward trend, because I feel like, one person, whether it be staff or student, having the ability to kind of throw off the whole plan is really quite conservative. And likewise with the state, 1% positive rate of less than 1%. Is that hard and fast, or more of just something to consider?
Yeah, well, I think all of those are questions for the school committee to discuss. So, I mean, maybe I should just back up for a second and say that this draft is something that I had circulated with the school committee a while back, and that at the time that we looked at the original draft, this stoplight metric for the color designation for communities was different, right? So you may remember that was different. So, to review, back in August, the DESI metric was that districts would go fully remote if the cases per 100,000 was 8 or higher, right? And this week in Westwood, we're at, I think it's like 32, right? I mean, we passed 8 the 3rd week of October, and it's just been going up. So the premise changed. When I initially drafted this, it was under the old metric, and then the state revised it. So I just want to point out that this has been changed now to be in concert with the current state designations. So, and then, since then, we have also met with the medical advisory group, and I've incorporated some of their feedback. And of course, we've got the news about the vaccine, as Tony mentioned. So, when I spoke with the medical advisory group, we were talking about the fact that in order to return fully in person, we have to move from a 6-foot parameter to a 3-foot parameter. And we talked a lot about that last month, right? And so that was something that so these public health metrics are based on that premise. In other words, I made sure that they knew that that's what fully in person would mean, right? And I just, want to emphasize again that that in order to do that, then we would have to engage in a collective bargaining process. We would have to negotiate with our unions in order to do that, right? So just with that context, this is for discussion, and I don't know that there doesn't seem to be anything that is hard and fast these days, right, Amanda? So, I think certainly that we might look at those metrics, and if we said, well, it was really, just because of this one particular thing we could identify, that isn't the intention of the metric, I would think that we would be flexible about that. That would be my opinion. But if you think the second bullet is too conservative, then maybe we should think about that.
Yeah, and I think it's a good feedback, Amanda, on that one, because I think the other 3 are, the thing with the other 3 is we were actually there in August. That's we're not there now, but I think it's fair feedback. I don't know how to word it. I guess minimal cases. I don't know. I don't really want an exact number, and maybe we just caveat this with kind of another bullet, like you're saying, Amanda, that we obviously there's the it's the overall context, where the cases are coming from, but also your point, like if we do surveillance testing, if we do that, well, we don't want to disincentivize doing surveillance testing because we're going to find, more asymptomatic people.
That's what I was thinking, right?
Yeah, no, that's fair feedback. So maybe we tweak it, or I don't know if we need to tweak it now, but maybe we tweak the wording to make it not so absolute.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Thank you.
So this plan, the fully in-person model, we would be 3 feet. And the feedback that we received from the council took into account the fact that we would be 3 feet. Is that right?
Yes, I will say that, I mean, yes, it definitely did. I think that one issue, it's just a hurdle, we would really have to think about this, is that right now when our kids eat, you know, the elementary kids have lunch, we've been taking them outside, but it's, you know, winter, right? So that may not be possible. And when they take off their masks, right now they are seated 6 feet apart for eating. The, you know, the medical advisory group thought that it was very crazy to think about having kids sitting closer than that with their masks off for eating, certainly right now. And so I think that we would have to look at that down the line, how we would manage that. Or if maybe if the metrics came down far enough, they would say that's okay, right? But it's clearly not right now.
The other piece I think that they brought up that was on the 3 feet is if you're in a place where we are, which is we actually are having cases in the school, if you have 3 feet, you suddenly have to quarantine like a whole classroom, right? Because right now in theory kids are 6 feet apart, so you know in theory you don't have to quarantine. So if you went to 3 feet immediately and we're having case loads whereas we're like, you're going to start being like, oh, this third grade's quarantining, that second grade, you know, a whole grade, you're going to start having a lot more quarantines. Where if we have a caseload, you know, if we're at where we are in the public health messages right now.
Right. And then that sort of begs the question from an operational perspective, if we're all in person, what happens to the kids who are quarantining if there's no Zooming in, right? Because right now, K through 3 are 4 days a week in person, and there's no Zoom alternative for those who stay home.
And that's true. And we knew that would be the case when we brought back 2 and 3, and we knew it was a problem, but we thought getting people back was the higher priority.
Right.
And we are working through that now because it's an issue and we're trying to come up with something.
Right. So I think we just have to have that same discussion if we go fully in person back, about what happens to the people at home. You know, clearly if you select remote, if you're not comfortable going back at 3 feet and you select the remote option, then you have the remote classroom, and that's fine, but you can't have people jumping back and forth, right, between the remote classroom and the in-person. So
Right.
that's just going to take the current problem that the elementary school principals are dealing with and sort of expand it to all schools, right?
Mm-hmm.
So,
Well, and hopefully if the metrics were better than they are now, that we wouldn't have as much of the need.
right, we wouldn't.
Although to Tony's point, you've got more close contacts if you're seated closer, right? So
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think this is good. I think people, you know, it's fair for people to say, what is the model? Like how do we know when we're going to go back and forth? That's an absolutely 100% fair question. So I think that this is a really good start. I think Amanda's points are valid. I think the input from the advisory group is critical. I mean, the truth is, it's just a very hard thing to pin down to numbers because there's so many variables. Not just like we could meet every single metric here and then have an operational issue, right? So, but I do think that it's an important discussion for us to have and for us to articulate what do we think needs to happen for us to go fully in person. Because as we've said all along, that's the ultimate goal, right? We certainly want to get these kids back in school as best we can.
Yeah.
It's just, you know, it's this discussion we've been having since June. It's the onion, right? You just kind of keep,
Right.
you whack one mole, another one pops up. And so I think when we start talking about this, we go down the same rabbit hole, to use 3 metaphors in one sentence.
Yeah, and I will say having clarity about the metrics is also very helpful for us operationally because we are going to have lead time, right? I mean, I won't go on about this, but trust me when I say it is not like you turn a switch and it magically happens, right? I mean, we have a lot of things that we would have to do, not the least of which is that if we change models, I don't know what that's going to do to the percentage of people who then want to go fully remote. Although I have to say, when we look at the family questionnaire results, I have some idea, and it was pretty dramatic. So, it's a big change. So my point is that, we do need some benchmark dates for looking at the metrics to give us enough lead time to then make the change. And, last month I had sort of floated out, December 15th as a date to look at the metrics for February 1st. And I would say that, similarly, I would extrapolate out January 1st for March, or January 15th for March 1st. And you see where
Because we need that lead time.
we need lead time to figure it out.
Right.
I mean, as it is now, with second semester coming up, I've sort of been saying to people, start thinking about contingency planning, 2 different models for second semester. And so obviously, I want to, it would be smoother if we had clarity about what target we're trying to hit. Operation.
Right.
I'd
Can I
just say,
ask one other
Emily,
quick question?
I'd just say, Emily, if you could just give us the dates that, you need to know.
Yeah.
That we got to come up with a decision, just in fairness to you.
Yeah,
And
so I
we-
put them down here at the bottom of the draft, and I was just sort of using that rule of thumb to say how much lead time we need. in
And we
order-
just use the best information we have at that time. But in fairness to you, you got to have some guidance to go ahead and make a decision, and you got to let us know when that has to be made.
And we have to give families time to decide what they want to do and get that data back. And then, I mean, I have to say that the timeline that I've laid out there is very tight. But, we would commit to doing it in the interest of making it happen.
Yeah, and I guess, the other piece is, while it's tight, if, like I said, I keep on talking about the curve. If you started to see the curve go the other way in a month now, you could start, there's some
Anticipating it, right?
anticipation. There's some anticipation, I think,
Yes.
or not. If it's, continues going the other way, it tells us a different thing.
Well, I agree. And I really hope that the vaccine is also going to be, the fact that they're prioritizing educators, I think, there's a reason that's happening. Sorry, Amanda, I think you.
Oh, yeah.
Just a quick question for clarity for myself. So related to the last paragraph relating to grades 4 and 5. So am I interpreting it correctly that the district is, considering sending the 4th and 5th graders back in advance of the entire district going back full time? Like there's a chance that they could go back sooner than everybody else. I'm not sure how to interpret that.
I'm confused. I didn't reference 4 and 5 specifically anywhere, right? So you're saying based on the last
The remaining elementary students.
Yeah. I guess what I was just saying there is that I think we are continually trying to think creatively about ways to get more kids back fully in person with the current safety parameters in place, right? So when we brought back 2 and 3, we did it within the 6-foot parameter, right? And so, yes, I do frequently ponder the question of 4 and 5. I have to say it's a much more challenging problem to solve right now because of the way we used resources to bring 2 and 3 back. And so I'm struggling a little more with that. But what I also am trying to get at here is that, other incremental changes. I know, there's a lot of questions about Wednesdays, and I don't have anything new to roll out here tonight. But, that to me seems like a high priority thing for us to think about. Right. And so I guess all I was trying to say there is that we would continue our efforts to think about how to bring more kids back with the same health and safety parameters that we have.
And when you're talking about the logistics of that, specifically, we're talking about space and who's going to man the classroom, right? Because at this point, we're still at 6 feet, and to go to 3 feet would require, and working with the union, and because it's a change in working conditions. So perhaps this is something we would be able to accomplish outside of that, but space and staffing, are the 2 hurdles, correct?
Those are the 2 hurdles. And, we are thinking, for instance, we just did a little exercise to look at a particular department of classes at the high school to say, well, let's say it weren't 6, let's say it was 5. This is just theoretically, right? But let's say we're doing that. And at 5 feet, 30 of the 51 classes that department has don't fit. So then we say, well, about 4 feet, and we still can't get, about 20% of them. But at 3 feet, everybody fits. So it really, I say that to say that 3 feet really does seem to be the magic number.
And I guess based on, I looked through some of the survey comments, because we could in theory do it without breaking the 3 feet, we could keep the 6 feet. I know you're working on the Wednesdays. I think there is, a lot of appetite if it's possible. I know that still requires talking to the teachers, but at least that one in theory, you wouldn't be violated. You'd still be able to keep the other safety protocols. Is that correct?
Yes, exactly. That would be the thinking.
Emily,
So
I have a question on
in terms of what you need from us,
Mhm.
it looks like December 15th, you need a decision about February 1st. Is that?
Well, yes, that's the idea. And I'll say out loud the obvious that it's not looking good.
It's not looking good, right? Because
Right, considering we're having upward, we're spiking, this is not the time that we would be able to make that decision.
Mhm.
but we would make a decision. It just wouldn't be the in-person decision.
That's what yes, correct. You are
Yeah.
correct.
Okay.
Yeah. And it's interesting when we look at the family questionnaire results. I think that people are responding to the questionnaire in a context, right? And I think that their comfort level with 6 feet versus 3 feet comes through in the, in the questionnaire. So I just think it's worth considering also. So I guess I just need to know if this seems like the right direction, and we do need to know relatively soon what the plan is, for February 1st, or are we saying we'll come back and look at it on January 15th and talk about March?
I think we say we come back in January. How can we responsibly say that, yes, go for it for February 1st, considering what we're in right now?
Emily, do you think that if the first of the year, we're beginning to do the asymptomatic testing of all the kids and the teachers, which will mean after about a couple of weeks of that we've pretty much found any of the infected people, teachers and kids, that will make a difference in this issue of 3 feet versus 6 feet? And the teachers appreciative of the effort that's being made to go to the state of the art of protecting them by doing this intensive amount of testing.
Mhm.
Does that play anything in the discussions about, we're doing everything possible?
Mhm. I have to say I don't know that I have a good sense of where teachers are on that specific issue. I will say, as we've talked about before, in order to make a change, so sort of medical public health advice aside, right? If we said we wanted to make that change, we would have to renegotiate with the teachers. That is like a legal requirement that we have in the public sector. And, it's a negotiation. And when the negotiation is around working conditions having to do with health and safety, the moment that the numbers are spiking in the public health metrics is not a great time to be at the bargaining table, to be honest, in terms of negotiating positions. So, but I do think, to your point, Charlie, that if we're able to say that we are concerned about health and safety, and here is something that we can put in place to assure people about health and safety, and to have a way to measure the impact of changing this particular variable that we have, that being physical distance, that to me feels like a conversation that we could have.
The other thing is we have gone way beyond the teachers' agreement on protecting them in their safety. We've gone way beyond the agreement on our own without their having us do it, because by us saying we're going to test all of the kids and all of the teachers that is something that we've done on our own without negotiating it. We've just done it because it makes sense. And it's the safest thing we can do for our teachers and our kids. And that has to be appreciated by some people, that you don't have to negotiate. We just are using our common sense to protect them as best we can, as well as our kids.
Yeah. And I should be clear, I think they do appreciate it. I mean, as you saw, 2% of them participated. And when we put out the, the memo that we were doing this, I got back some lovely emails from people, saying how much they appreciated that. So, I think that people do recognize that the district cares about, the folks in the community, and that we are doing our best to protect them. We periodically have gotten feedback from faculty and staff, for instance, about PPE, and they feel like it's the appropriate amount of PPE, if there's something else that they need. And we've gotten some good feedback about that as well.
So just to kind of finish the thought, so I'm with Carol in her perspective about where we are here on December 10th. Obviously, we're way off on these public health metrics. I would also, again, just second, I know you're working on it. I would really work to continue to think about Wednesdays, even if it's not a one size fits all. There was a lot of feedback in the survey. It doesn't violate any of our health and safety currently. And if it's not possible, it's not possible. But I think I think that's an incremental step that can make a difference. And I know the model at the high school, the schedule's changed, I think, to be better for academic purposes. So I guess that's my sentiment.
I agree 100%. I mean, that's something maybe we could do for February 1st. If we can't do all in person, maybe we can make that change by February 1st. But I 100% agree we should look at Wednesdays.
I agree. I agree.
Make that a priority.
We'll put that at the top of the priority list, and I will assess even, what it would mean at each level, right? I mean, we really should be thinking as flexibly as we can about how to do that. So, okay.
All right.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. That was a robust conversation, people. Are there any other liaison reports? I know there aren't many others these days because of the culture or the situation we're in right now. So
I just have a quick one, Carol.
You do, go for it.
Yes, we were able to get the holiday gift drive off the ground for the COA. So that actually closes tomorrow. But just about all of the schools have participated. So thank you so much to all the schools and the principals in collecting gifts and cards for homebound seniors.
That's great. Thanks, Amanda. And we have been meeting for budget steering, but I'm not going to get into the details of that because our first discussion item is the FY22 budget. So we can jump into it there, right, Emily?
Yes.
So let's go to that first discussion item. Let's roll up our sleeves. Let's get to the budget.
Okay. So this is, really just our preliminary discussion about FY22 budget development. And in a typical year, we would have had this conversation back in October or certainly by November. But everything has been kind of delayed as we've tried to figure out the landscape here. So as Carol mentioned, we have been meeting with budget steering through the town. I think everybody's in agreement that the budget process timeline is going to be a little bit different this year, and that we, there's just a degree of uncertainty there. So having said that, I just wanted to tell you about some of the budget assumptions that we've been talking about internally as sort of the foundation for developing the budget. And right now, principals and other cost center leaders using these assumptions are developing their budget requests and will be turning them in sometime next week just for the initial look. So it is important before we meet as a district leadership team to have sort of that conversation with those folks, to hear from the school committee about what's on your mind, because we really want to make sure that we, take all these factors into consideration. So bottom line here, we've decided to take as our assumption that the district will be back to fully in-person instruction in the fall. It would be distressing, indeed, if that were not the case. So we're going to assume that is the situation. And with that assumption, what I've asked people to do is to return to the approved FY21 budget and take a look at that. So we're in the process of calculating our level services number, but what we're going to do is calculate level services as if the FY21 budget with those particular FTEs had actually been implemented. If we were to calculate level services on the salaries for this year, it would be quite different, right? Because we have such a different staffing situation. So we're assuming that it'll be much more similar to FY21. The other thing that we are going to be doing is we're going to take a look and assess the impact of the staffing cuts that we decided to make back in June. So we cut a number of FTEs, and what we want to do is say, do we need to put those FTEs back now? Or do we think that there are some of those cuts that we could retain going forward? And so, for instance, the enrollment at the high school has been going down the last couple of years. It's going to go down a little bit more. It might be the moment where we can actually retain some of those cuts, sort of take the incremental cuts due to enrollment. So we're going to look at that. The reason that I think that that's important is that we know that we're going to have some costs that are associated with the impact of the pandemic. So, we've talked a lot about special education and the need for compensatory services and what might happen with ESY. So even if we were really trying to stay pretty closely aligned with the level services budget, we may need to reallocate some of that staff within sort of that general ballpark. So we want to take a look at that. The other thing is just that, we really this year, just as we're managing our way through the situation, haven't been able to pay as much attention to the district improvement strategy as, we would like. And so we do think in this, in this process, we have to return to those priorities and make sure that we're taking care of some of those things that we've committed to, some of the diversity, equity, inclusion work, for example. We really want to make sure that we're supporting that going forward in the FY22 budget. So that's sort of our initial approach of how we're thinking about it. We're taking a look at what we know from the census about incoming kindergarten. We're trying to start to project out the number of elementary sections, all those things that go into building the budget. So with that said, we would just love to hear from the school committee about what your priorities are and what you would like us to be considering.
So I guess I'll go first. Oh, go ahead, Charlie. Go ahead, Charlie.
Excuse me. I think it'd be helpful, Emily, to have us appreciate a lot of the details that just are in your mind. For example, what have the added costs been that we weren't expecting that came from COVID? What were they? What programs have been hurt? What programs have we had to cut back on or just not expanded as we wanted to? What are those programs, like these things you just mentioned, programs we wanted to expand? So if we could just separate out, what's been different, what would we like to have done that we couldn't do? What do we think we can do this year, maybe if we're creative? Things along that line, just lists would be very helpful, at least for me, to give you feedback on it. But it's so many changes have taken place. What could we do maybe that we couldn't do last year that we wanted to do? And what were the obstacles and what were the costs of those obstacles? How many of those costs are going to be brought on? Because I don't think we may be going back to normal next September, but we get another semester of a lot of these same costs to be carried. So that would be very helpful just to appreciate how different things are and what the costs are implied by this would be very helpful, at least to me.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess for me, the two thoughts. One, I'd like to just really support looking at those cuts we did. And my actual assumption is, so I think, I guess I really support that. I think there were a lot of, cuts we made that made rational sense. So I actually see that, I see the baseline budget is actually what we modified, at least in my view, the modified budget. But that's just me, in that, in other words, we reduce those 15 FTEs. To me, that's kind of, from my personal view, the baseline. And then what are the ones that, and there's some of those 15 that I think we certainly need to add back. The point for security, I do want to make a pitch for that. I don't, I think we kind of need to continue to work on that, but at least that's my view, because my sense is the other thing I'd be interested in hearing, right, and you may not know it now, but I remember Allison's presentation from many years ago about class sizes, and my takeaway from that was interventions are really a cost-effective way to kind of really move the learning. And I'm guessing there's going to need to be a lot of more interventions than necessary. So that may mean more IAs, and I don't know. You would know, but I'd be interested in hearing from the principals where they think we're going to need additional interventions, because my sense is we're going to need to spend money there.
Yeah, we agree. I mean, and that's exactly what I mean about if we had cut some, a classroom teaching position, for instance, at the high school, right? If we don't put that back, and we could then say, but maybe now we can get, a specialist,
right,
that deals with intervention, because we are going to be dealing with impacts. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think following along those lines, we also should look at the SEL aspect, because I think kids coming out of this are, there's just been, we all know, there's certainly been an increase in mental health issues as a result of this. So I think that's another place that I'd like to see prioritized.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's important, even if we don't come out of it, to the extent we can prioritize it.
Agree.
Maya, and I think along those same lines, I think it's awesome that we have interface referral services, and obviously Westwood Youth and Family Services is so valuable. I still worry though about kids that kind of fall through the cracks. Westwood Youth and Family Services has a long waiting list, from what I understand anyways, and they're a free resource. Interface, from what I understand, relies mainly on health insurance. So if there's students that don't have great mental health coverage or high deductible plans, or maybe their parents just aren't able to take them outside of school to see a clinician, it would be really great if we could figure out a way to support these kids in school coming out of the pandemic, and to see if there are additional supports that could be provided. And then, Emily, I of course absolutely support anything and all we can do related to the diversity and equity work.
Agreed. Yeah, and sort of there's also, I think, a dearth of, or at least it's very difficult to find mental health professionals for a lot of kids. It's sort of, it's always been a shortage, and now I think it's reaching a little bit of crisis level. So to the extent that the school can, at least even if it's short term, help out, that would, I think that's important. And I agree with the diversity curriculum and initiatives as well.
One thing you had before was the teachers would go around and watch each other, and you look for innovative things, and the teachers would share that. And I was wondering if it's possible during this difficult time to identify innovative things. People, this is the first time any of us ever been through this, and I'm sure there's creative, imaginative people out there. It'd be great if we could figure out ways that people have done things that are innovative, the way they've contacted the kids, the way they've motivated the kids. Just ideas, and even just to ask the teachers, what have you learned? What have you done that's creative that we could share? And it could be a third grade teacher sharing something with a sixth grade teacher. So I just think we used to do that, and we're just so overwhelmed with crises. But I think there may be some great ideas out there of innovative things that people have done that could be shared to allow somebody to make their job teaching easier. We've got teachers that, 10 years experience and 3 years experience. And they can really learn a lot from each other. And I just thought if there'd be a way to draw on that, it might help out a bit and be a way to learn something in this situation.
Yeah, I mean, connected sort of to that theme of innovation and change and the budget, I look for silver linings, and there aren't that many in the pandemic, but occasionally you stumble on one. And there are some changes that we made kind of out of necessity this year that we kind of like. And so we're thinking about that, and they may have some budget implications. So for example, the elementary specials this year, in an attempt to kind of keep the cohorts intact, we have this specials teachers doing a residency model. So instead of having a different special every day, they, might get music for 3 weeks or, something. And, we're curious what kids think about that, because we actually think it's really working well in some ways. And so, we might want to retain some of those kinds of ideas.
Right. Well, that
Even
was going
as-
to be my comment, because in other industries, we're learning a lot and changing the way we work. And so any ideas like that, those are the silver linings. And it would be nice to know that they're lessons learned, I guess.
Right.
Even
So
as the parents for their feedback, what have we done that's been helpful? What, ask for their feedback of what was imaginative that their teacher did, or maybe ideas they may have that they could suggest to us. And just to reach out for asking for that input too would be helpful.
Mhm. So I should just mention, I forgot to say this for the context, that at budget steering, what the discussion has been is that, the plan is to move forward in a way that's fairly similar to what the approach has been. If you look at sort of the financial picture in the town, and I can share with the whole committee what the information that Pam shared with us, sort of a 3% feels about like what is sustainable year over year. And we are concerned that there may be a cut in Chapter 70 next year, and also circuit breaker. You remember that we were concerned about that going into this year, and as it turns out, Chapter 70 has not really been impacted. The good news is that the town was prepared to use stabilization funds to sort of backfill a gap in Chapter 70 this year, and they didn't have to do that. Pam is suggesting that we probably should plan on a 20% cut in Chapter 70, but that I think the plan would be a similar strategy to what we had going into this year, to say, well, how can we stabilize the budget as opposed to our having to, sustain that cut in our operating budget. So that was certainly, good news from my perspective, that the town is continuing to take that approach. Okay, well, so we're going to start digging into budget next week, and for January, we actually have 2 dates for school committee on the calendar in January, and I would just say I think we're going to need them both in order to get through budget.
yeah, that's fine. And I wonder, and I'm hoping that we might have a new perspective, considering that the vaccines are coming this way. So maybe we'll be thinking a little bit differently. I know we're planning as if no COVID in the fall, but it's kind of hard to do.
Yeah.
And maybe we'll have a different perspective in the new year, possibly. But yeah, definitely 2 meetings. So anything else on the budget for right now? Okay. All right, Emily, we'll move on to the review of the family, the questionnaire. We got a lot of feedback. Parents were great, right? We had
Yes.
good numbers.
That was great. Let me just cue that up. Okay. Okay. So I will try to move sort of quickly through this. Let me say that there is a lot of data, and my intent tonight is just to say, here's what some of that data is. We have not yet really disaggregated it and sort of processed it as a district leadership team. So whereas I can say this is what the data is, I don't know that I have any conclusions or know what to make of it yet, right? So we're sort of thinking that through. But we had 1,591 responses, and you can see the breakdown here across the different levels. In terms of who was responding, you can see here the different educational models that were represented. So here are some of the findings. we asked some people just about the schedule. I'm going to go through some quick sort of good news things. How consistent is your child's weekly school schedule? I would say the answer to that is pretty consistent. So we seem to be doing fairly well on that front. We asked between full class video conference sessions, group work, health sessions, independent time, how would you characterize your child's workload on remote days? And about 73% of respondents said that it was sufficient or the right amount of work. There was some variation across levels, I will say. So whereas you can see overwhelming is about 7% here, that number was higher at the high school. It was about 12%. And it was 5% at the middle school and 4% at elementary. And so sort of correspondingly, the two little responses at the high school was 15%, middle school was 33%, and elementary was 19%. We asked some questions about adequate break time. So the 3 would be sort of hitting the mark at the right place. And you can see here about 63% said that we were. The too much break time was very consistent across levels. So we didn't see much variation there. In terms of hitting the mark, it was a little higher at elementary. About 70% of elementary respondents chose 3. And the not enough break time, so at the middle school and high school, it was between 56 and 59%. So we see some splits there between secondary and elementary. We asked about kids' ability to navigate technology independently. I think here you really have to look at it broken out across levels. So not surprisingly, 95% of high school respondents chose 4 or 5, that they are, independent. 89% at middle school, and then it drops at elementary to 66% answering 4 or 5, which doesn't come as a shock, I think. So then we asked some questions about model and satisfaction here, and you can see the result. So we asked people whether or not they agreed with the statement, "I'm satisfied with my child's current educational model." And so 58% of people chose either strongly agree or agree. 14% neither agreed nor disagreed. And then 28% disagreed or strongly disagreed. So, that's about 28%, as I said, who are in the disagree or strongly disagree category. And I think that's, certainly a significant number to be thinking about. I will be totally honest that when I think back on the correspondence that I have been receiving over the last few months, I thought that number was going to be a lot higher. So I actually was relatively pleasantly surprised to see that number. And then I think kind of a related question is, overall, I feel my child is making progress in their learning and growth this year. And we see sort of a similar breakdown, although whereas 28% disagreed or strongly disagreed in terms of their model satisfaction. In terms of learning, whether or not their kid is making progress, that actually dropped to 21%. So there are people who aren't satisfied with the model, but still, perhaps agree that their kids are making progress. I do think it's notable here that you have sort of this big section of people who said, neutral. And I was actually thinking that with my parent hat on, I was wondering how I would answer this about my own kids. And I probably would have said that I'm not sure that I know, really. I'm pretty confident that they're learning, but I don't know for sure. I kind of am relying on their teachers to tell me that. So if we look at this and break it down, I think it is interesting to look at it across levels here. So you can see that on this question about satisfaction with the current educational model, the strongly agree or agree was significantly higher at elementary than it is at secondary, which makes sense to me given that we've got K-3 back 4 days a week at elementary. And there really was not much difference between the middle school and the high school. In terms of that question about progress, again, I think it's related to the prior question. So we see stronger agreement at the elementary than we do at secondary. And then again, we don't really see much difference between middle school and high school. We asked some questions about communication, and I was pretty pleased with this. So generally speaking, I think most people think the district is doing a pretty good job with communication, with 85% selecting 4 or 5 and only 3% choosing 1 or 2. We then sort of asked the same question about communication from your child's school as opposed to the district, and it was similarly a pretty positive result with 81% choosing 4 or 5, a little bit lower, but generally still very good. And then we asked the same question about teachers, and you can see that the percentage responding in 4 or 5 does dip a bit there to 66%. This is another one where I think disaggregating it by level is important. You see real differences here between elementary and secondary. I think that's something that we should take a look at and sort of ask some questions about. It makes sense to me in a way that I think, at the elementary level, you've got one teacher with maybe 20 students, right? It's a different relationship often between the teacher and the parent at the elementary level. And at the secondary level, we have teachers who have maybe 100, 120 students, and they aren't able to communicate with each parent in the same way. Kids have, 7 teachers instead of 1. So it's a little more complicated. I will also note, though, that, middle school progress reports are going out next week. I think that's an important piece of communication that people just haven't gotten yet. I wonder, how that's going to impact how they feel. We're also looking into some things with Google Classroom interacting with Aspen so that we can make more information available to parents sort of in an ongoing way. So we'll be giving this one some thought.
I also think, Emily, sorry to interrupt. I think this is, though, consistent to, if you ask this question pre-COVID, I think it would be consistent.
Yes.
Right? Because a lot of the communication, particularly at the high school, is done teacher to student, not teacher to parent.
Yes.
So, this does not surprise me at all. We don't, as a high school parent, you don't get a lot of interaction with their teachers. It's really, so anyway, I just wanted to make that point that I'm not sure you would see much of a difference if we weren't in a pandemic.
Yeah, no, I think that's important, right? We don't know what this compares to,
right?
And clearly there are developmental differences between high school and elementary in terms of how they're interacting with teachers. Yeah, good point. So then we asked some questions about health and safety protocols. We asked people on a scale from 1 to 5, 5 being very comfortable, 1 being not comfortable at all. Given the health and safety protocols we have in place now, how comfortable do you feel sending your child to school for in-person learning? And I felt quite good about this. So you can see we have 84% of respondents selecting either 4 or 5. And on the other end, it's about 8% for 1 and 2. And, I mentioned the superintendent's report that we started the year with about 8% of our families opting for the fully remote model. And so, that seems kind of in keeping with that statistic as well. And then we asked people, currently we maintain 6 feet of physical distance for in-person. If that standard were decreased to 3 feet of physical distance, how comfortable would you be sending your child to school for in-person learning? And we do see a pretty significant swing in the numbers here. So it shifts from 84% selecting 4 or 5 to 55% selecting 4 or 5. And correspondingly, we move from 8% not feeling comfortable to 34% not feeling comfortable. And I did look at this by level, and the data is remarkably consistent across elementary, middle school, and high school. There's virtually no difference in the responses there. We asked some questions about testing. We asked first about the, free, if we're able to offer free rapid tests for symptomatic individuals, would you be likely to make use of the service? And you can see there that many, many people would. And then we asked about implementing a periodic surveillance testing program. Would you consent to having your child participate? So these are the numbers, I think, Amanda, that you were talking about. And I'm going to go back and look at the data and make sure that I'm interpreting it correctly. It's funny the way that the Google Data Studio was spitting out the data because it was a check all that apply question. So the percentages I think are a little strange. But my understanding is, so 7% said they would not consent, and then 18% answered not sure. And so my interpretation is that 75% would consent under some condition, right? But we had 3 different possible funding sources. And so the percentage of people who respond yes to each of those 3 different funding sources were different, right? But I just kind of threw them all into one bucket here for the sake of argument. And then I looked at it by grade level, and there's some differences, but not, not a lot. It is interesting because when we talked to our medical advisors, they, they suggested that if you were only going to target certain grades with a surveillance testing program, that it would make sense to do the older kids. And so that's, helpful that is higher there.
How knowledgeable are the people that were surveyed in understanding what a periodic surveillance testing program is and why you would do it?
Yeah, well, I had a paragraph that tried to explain it, but I mean, that might be the extent of their education, Charlie. So there was one sort of introductory paragraph explaining the objective and how it would work. But I think, as Tony mentioned earlier, we would want to do a lot more educating before we launched it. And then some of the questions we asked at the beginning, I actually saved for the end here. So we asked some questions about SEL because we're thinking about that a lot. And we asked, based on your child's experience, how would you characterize the district's focus on SEL at this point in time? So you can see 3 here would be the just right mark. And we had 60% of people say it's just right. And you can see then we have about 26% who would like to see more focus on SEL, and about 13% who think it's too much focus right now. So I did look at that also by level. And what's just sort of interesting is that, so a higher percentage of elementary parents think that we're hitting the mark correctly. 67% of elementary parents had us at the just right mark, as opposed to 53% at the high school and 55% at the middle school. And that the variation isn't with the too much focused people. So that number, 13%, stays pretty stable. It's differences in the other end. So it's actually our high school respondents that are the most concerned about this, with 35% answering either 1 or 2, and 30% at the middle school, only 19% at the elementary. And then I have to say that this question was the one that I think really has me thinking quite a bit. So we asked, at this point in time, how connected is your child feeling to their teachers and peers? And we certainly recognize that this is a critical component of students' experience. And I think it's the question that we had the most variation in responses, right? If you think about sort of the shape of this curve, it looks a little different from what we were seeing in the other questions. And so I think this is one that we really need to kind of, give some more thought to. And we looked at it broken down here, and you can see that there are some big differences between elementary and secondary again. Which in some ways makes sense to me. I mean, obviously the relationship between a teacher and kids in an elementary classroom where you're with one teacher all day and it's a community is a little different. We also have more in-person learning time at elementary, so that's a difference. So, this is something that I think we need to really take a look at. We surveyed parents first, and now we're about to survey students. And some of this data that we're getting from parents is helping to inform what questions we ask of students, right? So having seen this response from parents, we're very curious about that and want to ask some questions about that of kids as well. So hopefully we'll get some more information about that.
Are you going to ask the question, I mean, is this one question saying to your teacher and your peers, or are you going to say, how connected are you to your teacher how connected are you to your peers?
I think we would break it out. I mean, those feel like very different questions.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
what my point is. I think
Yeah.
they are.
Yeah, I think so. So
Yeah,
we're trying to finalize the student questionnaire. We also are doing one for faculty and staff. And our goal is to get those out before the break so that we have that data as well. And we'll be taking a look at this. Principals just got access to that Google Data Studio where they could disaggregate it for their school today. So we will be thinking further about this and trying to make sense of it and thinking about how it informs what we do going forward.
Okay, thank you for that review of the survey. Anybody have any further questions on this before we move on to our last discussion item? No? Okay. The last discussion item has to do with the policy revisions related to Title IX. This appears as an action item on our agenda, but it was supposed to be in discussion. So we have the first reading of the Title IX sexual harassment policy, the first reading of the grievance procedure for complaints of sexual harassment. Do you want to?
So Allison's really been working on this. I think she's
Okay.
the best person to provide the context for this.
Yeah, I'll be brief. I think I put this in memo form probably more clearly than I'll be able to say it with words. But as folks might be aware, there was change in or kind of final rule issued around Title IX, which is the kind of regulatory guidance related to civil rights law that prevents discrimination and harassment on the basis of sex in educational settings. That final rule went into effect in August and has sort of policy implications because there are real differences between that and the state guidance. And so it kind of created this interesting conundrum. At the advice of our council, we actually created a separate Title IX policy that can work sort of as a parallel track to our existing harassment and discrimination policy. So essentially, reporters have options in terms of kind of which pathway they would opt to take. I mean, if there are kind of clear ways that a situation fits Title IX, we are obligated to use that procedure. However, this other procedure remains intact. The other reason to kind of keep this separate pathway intact, other than the differences between the state and federal law, is that there is some sort of sense out there in the wider legal community that this final rule will be up for some type of revision, given the change in administration at the federal level, and that could be forthcoming within the next year or two. So as opposed to kind of going back and reworking our existing harassment and discrimination policy and protocols, we can keep those intact. We have a separate policy that we can then adjust as needed and not kind of blow the whole thing up. So that's the guidance we got. So that is where we took it.
Okay. So first reading. So we'll review this and we'll put this on the agenda for our next meeting. Okay. All right. At this time, we move to public participation, right? I didn't miss anything else. Nope, we've got all the discussion items. Connor, are you out there?
Yes, I am.
Connor, can you explain quickly how the public connects for public participation? And I'll just indicate that at this point, we ask anyone who is participating that this is an opportunity to comment or question on issues pertaining to the schools. I will ask you to provide your name and street address. And Connor, if you could just inform people as to how they connect, if they haven't done so already, and then you will shepherd this process for us.
Absolutely. So for the people who are watching at home or on YouTube, if you want to follow the link that's on the bottom of the screen, not the link, I apologize, the information, in order to log into the Zoom webinar, you'll be able to interact. For those who are already in the Zoom webinar, you will be able to raise your hand with the function that's at the bottom of the screen. Once I see that the raise hand function is up, I will ask if you can unmute. I will announce that I am unmuting you, and then you will be able to speak where you provide your name, address, and then your comments. So the first person that I'm going to be unmuting is Antigone Grasso. So unfortunately with Antigone, you're using an older version of Zoom, so I need to promote them to a panelist in order to give them the ability to speak. So I'm going to bring them into the panelist side right now, and I will put them back down into the attendees list when we are done.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Antigone Grasso, 44 Oak Street. First, I want to echo the decision tonight about really prioritizing utilizing Wednesdays to bring more students back. My first question is that I understand that the Stoughton Public Schools is establishing a plan to get all their students back by February or March, and they are applying the 3 to 6 feet outlined in the DESE guidelines. They also cited the massive amounts of evidence from across the globe that schools are not super spreaders. Has anyone spoken with Stoughton Public Schools about how they're accomplishing this so that we can leverage for our own planning?
I actually did reach out to the superintendent in Stoughton yesterday, haven't heard back.
Okay, great, thank you. And then I was wondering if you could comment on any plans for a parent forum to answer any remaining unanswered questions.
So at this time, we don't have any plans for an additional parent forum. We have the public participation during these meetings and we feel that's sufficient at this time. There hasn't been any further discussion. I don't know if anyone else wants to jump in on that, but at this point, there has been no further discussion. Okay.
My last question is that I understand that there's certain elementary schools, and I know it was discussed earlier in the meeting today, there's certain elementary schools that do have more space constraints than others, and that this is limiting how many grades can be brought back. I know it's staff and student and space, but has there been a room-by-room assessment done for each of the buildings? It sounded like, Emily, you did mention that was done calculating how many kids could get back at 6, 5, 4, and 3 feet. And is that something that could be shared more publicly with parents?
Well, I don't have a document that has all of that information to share. I will say that, yes, we certainly have a very good sense on what space is available in each of our elementary schools and what the class sizes are, which, vary from building to building. And we're giving that a lot of thought.
Right. I just wonder if maybe that could help with people seeing the numbers and seeing kind of where there are the limitations in case something creative could be done kind of across the entire district. It's just something that I thought, sharing more information, being more transparent with the parents about where there are the limitations, maybe some creative ideas could come forward about how to deal with that.
Okay. Thank you, Antigone.
Thank you.
Okay, the next person I will be allowing to talk is Heather Morrison. And Heather, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
We can hear you.
Great. My name is Heather Morrison. I'm at 74 Magnolia Drive. First, I would start by when you mentioned testing, I would just give a tip that you might want to share with folks. The Stop the Spread sites are really excellent, especially the new Framingham site. You can make an appointment, you usually get an appointment that day, and then your results are within 24 hours. We've been using it pretty consistently this week at my facility, and it's been excellent. So I really would encourage you to, your small task force might want to recommend that to parents and teachers to use. It's a really great resource. Sorry, I just lost my notes. All right. I just also, I went into this meeting, I was really optimistic. I thought we were going to be focused on the February date, and I'm just really disappointed now that while other districts like Stoughton, as Antigone mentioned, are working to build up to in-person, it seems like we've sort of given up for the February date now. The metrics, I was glad to see some discussion of that they were really overly conservative. I think going above and beyond what the state and what, nationwide experts have put forth is just too much. They're not going to be achievable, and you're just going to make it harder on yourselves. The data has shown, the studies have shown that you can safely open even when there's high prevalence. They're doing it in Europe. They're doing it in other states across the country. Schools are a safe place to open. You don't need your rates to be zero. You don't need your positivity to be less than 1%. Those are metrics that you need to use for other things like nursing homes, but you don't need to use those for schools. I would again emphasize, as Charlie even mentioned during this meeting, that the kids aren't getting sick. This isn't a serious condition for them. And we really need to balance the harms that we're doing by having these students fall behind in their education and in their mental and emotional being. As you also highlighted, there is a mental health crisis going on, and the kids are not okay. Sitting in Zoom calls all day for hours at a time is not okay for the kids. You mentioned a few barriers that are preventing you, children eating lunch. Kids across even Massachusetts in Catholic schools are going to school every day, and they're eating lunch just fine without spread. They have little cubbies that they put up on their desks, and that works just fine for them. They also allow for Zooming into your classroom during quarantine periods. So I think that's something that you can pretty easily accommodate. It's not perfect, and it's not going to be a perfect experience for that kid that's at home, but at least they still get to participate. I really hope that you reconsider the decisions that you made today, and you think hard about where these decisions are based on, and not to base your decisions on fear, but just to simplify things. Give everybody the option, in person or remote.
Okay, Heather, thank you for your comments. I'm the only thing I'm going to say to you at this point is, well, we appreciate all of your input. We've received your emails and so forth. Rest assured that we are using our resources wisely, and we are not basing our decisions on fear. So that's all I want to say to that. But I think we do appreciate your comments. Okay. So Connor, do we have anyone else in the pipeline?
Yes, we do. I'm going to be unmuting Donna Morrison next. And Donna, you should be allowed to speak.
Thank you. Donna Morrison, 303 Oak Street. I want to thank you all, school committee, administration, for doing a fantastic job of keeping our students in school, keeping the COVID numbers very low among students and administrators. This hybrid model is working fantastically. As to bringing all the students back full-time, I think it's a bad idea. And I believe that any parent who would like their child in school full-time does have the option to do that. And if they would so like to do that, they may do that at a private school or some other location where they feel comfortable doing that. You guys are doing a fantastic job by keeping our children and administration safe. As to the testing protocol, the numbers that I saw for the staff who was willing to participate in that, the 70 to 75%, that remains true in other towns that are offering it to their staff. You're not going to get 100% of the staff willing to participate in that testing. So my question to you, is it worth the money if you're not going to get 100% participation from your teachers in administration to do that? Is it worth going forward with that program? What are you going to gain from it if they're not all willing to go all in? So thank you very much for your time, and thank you for allowing me to speak.
Thank you.
At this time, I do not see anybody else with their hand raised. Again, that function should be at the bottom of your screen if you're an attendee in the Zoom webinar.
Okay.
Oh, we did have one person come in. I'm going to be
Okay.
unmuting Brooke Garcia. Brooke is also using an older version of Zoom, unfortunately, so I'm going to be moving them to the panelist tab in order to allow them to speak. And Brooke, you should have the ability to unmute yourself.
Hi, my name is Jacqueline. Actually, Brooke's my daughter.
Oh, I apologize.
That's okay. Jacqueline Garcia. I live at 206 Alder Road. I'm just gonna echo Heather Morrison. I'm a pediatric nurse in Newton, and I just really truly hope that we are considering the mental health of kids right now. I don't know if everyone in the community is really letting you guys know what's going on in our homes, but kids are not okay. And we might not even see the true effects just yet, but stay tuned. I just really hope that we are doing everything we can to get these kids back in school.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. Connor, anyone else?
This time, we have Donna Morrison raising her hand again. And Donna, you should be able to unmute yourself once more.
Thank you. 303 Oak Street, Donna Morrison. I just wanted to say that I think that parents are putting an awful lot of onus on the school administration and teachers for the welfare of their own children as far as physical well-being and mental well-being. If they feel that there's a problem with obesity or mental health, then they need to advocate for their own child and take care of that and not just leave it up to the school system. I think that they are making it your problem and trying to have you solve all the problems of their students. And they need to be advocating for their own child in their own home and taking care of business at home also. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. All right.
We
Connor?
have 3 more hands now. I'm going to be allowing you to talk for Jackie K.
I have a point of, excuse me, Chair Lewis, what is a point of order? There was a maximum time, I think, per person per policy of 3 minutes. So
Yes.
I'm just cognizant as we have these people coming for a second time, we should enforce our policy.
Yes, and I have been watching the time.
Okay.
So yes, and you're right, Tony. I should have indicated that at the beginning, as we usually do, 3 minutes. And absolutely. So
It's
our
cumulative,
next,
yeah.
those that participate, please keep that in mind. And also, you know, if you have comments that are similar to other comments, perhaps well, I'll let you all speak, but if your sentiments are exactly the same as others, it may not be necessary to voice what you want to say at this time. But go ahead. Who's next?
So next, I just asked if Jackie K would unmute themselves.
Hi, Jackie Keaveney, 22 Redwood Road. I just have a question about the 4th and 5th graders. What about having them come back on Wednesdays? Is there any plan? I got a little confused with the earlier part of the meeting, but is there any plan to get them to come back so they're at least for at least 3 days?
There's no specific plan at this point, but I think the discussion at school committee tonight was that they would like us to prioritize examining Wednesday and thinking about how we can use that day.
Okay, thank you. And then one other question. When it came to the survey for the 3 to 6 feet for the elementary school, do you have a breakdown of that at all, or for how many people? I'm just curious for the people who are in 4 days, what they felt about it as opposed to the people who are in 2.
It was consistent. So for 3 feet, 4 or 5 being on the comfortable end, It was 56% at the high school, 55% at the middle school, 53% at elementary. I think that's what you're asking. And on the flip side, 1 or 2, the not comfortable, it was 33% at the high school, 34% at the middle school, 36% at the elementary. And I should add that we will publish the survey results and post them on our website so everyone can take a look.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Next, I will be unmuting Tara. So Tara, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we
Can hear you.
This is Tara Themistocles, 294 Clapboard, Tree Street. I wanted to echo what Heather said. I would love to see the kids go back in February. I'm a mom of 4, and mental health is super important. My kids have all struggled. I have an 8th grader who has been here listening the whole entire time, just giving her input and us having a dialogue and a conversation, which I think is super important for all of our kids, to talk about their education for them and the older kids in high school. I love that Charlie said, talk to the teachers, because I do think that they are huge, huge parts of our children's lives, and think that they have a ton of good feedback. Dan McNabb at the Sheehan School has been overly helpful with my kids and helping them and giving them great positive feedback and really supporting them emotionally and mentally. So I really would echo what he said about talking to the teachers, because I do think that it is really important. I would love to see you guys get a survey to the middle school or the kids that are able to in the high school and ask them how they feel about their education as well. Like I said, Ava's sitting here right with me, and I think it's really important to help our kids help themselves. So Ava, want to say anything? She wanted to echo that the long classes are really hard. She academically does well, but kids are on their phones and tuning out, and that it's really been difficult. So that's pretty much it. Thank you. You guys are all doing a great job. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
And I would say, Ava, the survey is on its way. So next week, we look forward to your input and your classmates' input.
Okay. Next, I will be unmuting Keela. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Keela, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, this is Kayla Kelsey, 31 Beacon Street, Islington area. I'm a mother of 2 children, one a high schooler, 9th grader, the other one in preschool. My older son, my first one is under special needs, under IEP, and the struggles that we have experienced during this time has been tremendous. Also, we appreciate the fact that this district have chosen to have 2 days in person compared with other districts that had everything remotely. Also, we are in a big hope that we'd like to see these children's 5 days in person. These children need to study and learn more by being in person. They are more motivated, and we are going to create less problems, emotional problems, mental problems. And at the same time, I know that many districts have done it. And by hearing other voices previously on the healthcare aspect, having both my parents in healthcare, we understand the importance of, we want them first healthy, mentally, physically, and we should not fear whatever any pandemics now in the future is going to come. They have to deal mentally with everything, but not being able and isolating them, literally isolating them, it's even worse than COVID. At the same time, we are very cautious about if other private schools have done better. I don't think it's more just the money matter. I don't think that we should say to the other parents to go to private schools. That's not a good answer. So we have to be very happy that we have a very, very great system in public schools, very competitive, very comparable, with any private settings. So we have to learn from the best, either private or public, but at the same time, we have to be all as a whole. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Okay. Brooke Garcia has her hand raised again, so I'm going to be bringing her into the panelist section.
Okay, Brooke, I'm going to ask you to limit your comments as you've already spoken, but go ahead.
Yes, I plan to be brief. I just, Donna Morrison, I'm not sure if you have children in the district at this time. I just.
Okay, so, but wait, Brooke, I'm going to ask you not to, I mean, when you're making your comments are to me and not about people who have spoken tonight, okay?
Okay, I just hope that, you know, I think we're all trying to be supportive of each other. So when someone comes on and makes a comment that any other parent who's spoken is perhaps blaming the school district on, you know, mental health issues within their home, I don't think that's a fair statement. I think people need to be kind and supportive of each other.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The next person I'll be unmuting is Sandra Castanati. So Sandra, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, Sandra Castellini, 54 Birch Street. I just wanted to mention that I'm really happy we're talking about the new school, and I'm a big supporter of the new school. And then you also talked about what might happen with the remaining school. And I guess I'm just concerned because I also follow what's going on in the town and all of the capital projects that they're interested in putting forth. And, you know, obviously looking at the climate of, you know, COVID and the economy. And I just feel like, you know, schools might get a little bit buried under that. And I'm hoping that we can keep schools in the forefront. I mean, I think that's why a lot of people move to Westwood, and it's so important. I guess I just want to make sure the school committee is working closely with the select board and other people to make sure they know how important this is to the residents, because not only for folks that have people in the schools, but it's keeping everybody's home values up. And I don't want to get lost in the shuffle of other things happening.
No, we appreciate that. And yes, we are working with the other boards in town. So I don't know if you want to add anything to that.
No, I think it's, you know, there are a number of initiatives in town, and I think it's eventually going to be up to the town residents. But, you know, we're here to advocate for the schools. And I'm going to plug the community forum. Come to the community forum and you know, raise questions there as well, because that's a good place to have these discussions.
Thank you. Connor, anyone else?
Nope, at this time I do not see anyone else with their hand raised.
Okay, thanks for public participation. At this point, we're going to close that section of the agenda and move on to our action items. We're going to start with approval of the November 12th, 2020 meeting minutes. Can I get a motion to approve those minutes?
So moved. Second.
How about a second? Is there any discussion on those minutes? Okay, let's take a vote. Maya?
Yes.
Amanda?
Yes.
Charlie?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
I'm a yes. All are in favor. Motion carries. Thank you very much. Let's move on to the next one. Approval of the December 2nd, 2020 meeting minutes. Can I get a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Second.
Any comments or discussion on these minutes? Seeing none, let's take a vote. Charlie?
Yes.
Tony?
Yes.
Maya?
Yes.
Amanda?
Yes.
Okay, motion, oh, me too, yes. And so it is unanimous and that motion carries as well. New business? No new business. Okay, moving on. I think we move on to adjournment. I know we're all meeting again, but I know there are people on the call I want to, and maybe they won't be tuned in to our next meeting before the end of the year. So however people celebrate, make sure that you stay healthy. May it be a healthy celebration, or one in good health, I should say. And I appreciate your time, everybody, tonight. It's time to, I would say, go home, but shut down. So motion to adjourn,
I'll make a second.
second. All right, Amanda, are you ready to be done?
Can you tell? I am. Yes.
Charlie, have you had
Yes.
enough? Okay, Maya, do you want more?
I vote yes to adjourn.
Okay, so she doesn't want more.
I do
Tony,
not want
are we
Yes.
done?
Yes.
We're done. All right, I'm done.
I think
We're
I'm the
gonna
only one who's
adjourn now.
not home. I've got to get in my car to beat the curfew.
Oh, right. All right, thank
You
you
all
all
bright and
very,
early.
very much.
See you guys at 8 in the
morning.
morning.
Yeah, I can't wait.
Yes.